Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Coach Brian Clinton enthusiasts, people who are counting the days. I think it's 50 days away from football in Norman, Oklahoma. This is the podcast for you. This is another episode of the Oklahoma Drill, a podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I am Jesse Crittenden, and I am joined, as always, by Mr. Camo Man himself, Coach Brian Clinton. Brian, I can't see the upper part of your torso. I can only see your head.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Green
Don't you love
screen,
that joke?
man. Just green screen.
Don't you love that camo joke?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Is that actually even camo?
No, it's just a comfortable fishing hoodie.
Why did I say camo?
It is. I mean, it is a camo pattern, but it's not like I wouldn't wear this if I was going hunting. It's not legitimate camouflage, but it is a camo pattern. So I mean, you're right, but
Oh God, so I grew up in Stillwell, Oklahoma, and hunting is a big thing there. My family got a whole family of hunters, and I've never actually gone hunting. Now I've gone fishing multiple times, many
okay,
times growing up, but I've
okay.
never actually been hunting. And I think I just showed my lack of expertise in this intro. I should have checked with you before. Brian, we are here to talk about SEC Media Days. It is Monday through Thursday, and OU is going on Tuesday. I don't know if you knew this, but OU is officially in the SEC, and this is their first time going to SEC Media Days. And while people who've never been to conference media days events, I can tell you that they're usually just a lot. They're just a lot and
Hmm.
not always the most compelling, and you kind of know what to expect ahead of time. Fortunately, this year, Brian, this media days brings a whole lot of new stuff.
Yeah.
This feels pretty monumental. I mean, first time for the SEC with 16 teams. Obviously, it's OU and Texas's first time to be at the media or to be at SEC Media Day. So I'll actually tell you that while it's going to be a lot, and I'll be there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you'll be there Monday, Tuesday. It's going to be a lot, but there's actually a part of me that's like, hey, this might be fun and new, maybe. Like, I don't really know what to expect. I don't know. How are you feeling?
Yeah, pretty well the same. I think one of the big things, I haven't been on the beat a long time. I've covered some Big 12 stuff for a few years now, and then this will be going on year two, which is just crazy with OU Insider. But to see like all of the SEC personalities, Paul Feinbaum's like the top one that just comes to mind. But seeing all those guys and kind of mixing it up with some of the new beats and getting to know those guys will be interesting. I'm curious, you almost have um like a preconceived notion of what people are like based on what their football team or their fan base is like, and so it's going to be interesting to see like how that aligns. I'm just excited overall about seeing those logos um amongst the SEC logos. I just think it's really exciting, and it's going to be it's just a new era. So being there and getting to see what the coaches and players or what the coach and players have to say is going to be pretty cool.
You mentioned the coaches and players. We found out a couple of days ago who OU is bringing, and Brent Venables will be joined by Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, and Jackson Arnold. Now, that seems pretty obvious, three guys to bring. I mean,
Yeah,
especially Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman
yeah,
are your senior defensive leaders. That fits pretty well the mold. But I actually thought OU bringing Jackson Arnold is pretty interesting. Just for me, because I was like, who did OU bring the last 3 years to conference media days? Obviously, the Big 12 media days. And not only there hasn't been an underclassman be a player representative for OU the last 3 years.
Yeah.
23, 22, 21. OU fans will likely remember that Lincoln Riley famously didn't bring Spencer Rattler to the 21 media days, despite him being the returning starter. So while it seems obvious, I think it actually says a lot bringing Jackson Arnold to, especially to OU's first ever trip to SEC media days. Does anything particularly stand out to you just about the contingency that OU's bringing? And how noteworthy is it that Jackson Arnold is coming?
So as a group, the four men that'll be representing Oklahoma, I think it says a lot, one, about the culture of the team. And really it's like a good synopsis of the team, right? You've got experience on the defensive side of the ball and skill and lots of high expectations. And then for, anybody outside of Norman or people that have been following Oklahoma really closely, Jackson Arnold is kind of you know what he was in high school, but kind of an unproven commodity, but certainly a guy with extremely high upside. And I think that's what Oklahoma's offense is. It's unproven, but the upside is just incredible. So, I do think having a personality like Danny Stutzman is like, I think that really bodes well. I hope that he is kind of unleashed a little bit with some of that stuff, with it being his final go around, first year in the SEC, lots of disrespect coming into this. I kind of hope that he kind of wears his emotions a little bit on his sleeve, and not necessarily to a disrespectful point, but just to have a little chippiness is okay. You know what we're going to get from Billy Bowman? He's extremely well versed in a media spotlight, so we know what we're going to get from him. With Jackson Arnold, I agree with you. I do think it's very interesting that he is one of the three, but I think it absolutely was the right move. Even though he is not uh, your most veteran player on that side of the football, he undoubtedly has the most pressure, undoubtedly has the most riding on him this season. And for a quarterback of his pedigree, I don't think you're going to see him be uncomfortable up there. He's been in the spotlight dating back to high school, playing for, when you're the starting quarterback at Denton Guyer and you're the Gatorade Player of the Year. I think that just kind of comes with it, right? So, but I do think it's a really good thing to not only put him out there and let the world kind of know who he is a little bit, but you're really not just giving him the confidence, but you're giving the rest of the guys on the team, like, this is one of our guys. He is a representative of that roster as much as Billy Bowman and as much as Danny Stutzman by proxy here. So, I know that he's stepped into that role. We've heard a lot about him stepping right into being a leader, with Dillon Gabriel gone, and I'm excited to see, how he has matured as a sophomore, because this is one of those situations where he is truly being forced to grow up immediately. Like, it's not throw you out there as a freshman for 12 games, but it is a fast track. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. I expect him to do great. But I couldn't have been happier with the picks.
I think it's going to be interesting to hear him talk, because I think we got to see a little bit more of his personality during the spring,
Yes.
especially compared to the couple of times we got to talk to him when he was a true freshman. I mean, him acknowledging that it kind of sucked being a backup last year when he said that this spring, that makes me wonder, like, again, bringing him to SEC Media Days and everything you just said, he is an unquestioned leader as a true sophomore. I do wonder if he feels emboldened to continue, being a little bit candid.
Yeah.
And these settings are always really interesting. And also, SEC Media Days, I think, is a little differently structured than Big 12 Media Days. I think everything's a little bit more formal. I think there
Yes.
are less like scrums and
Yeah.
and things like that. So it is gonna be interesting nonetheless. But I did think it was like it may seem obvious to bring him, but I didn't think it was a given that
Yeah.
Jackson Arnold was
Yeah.
coming. So I think that's gonna be interesting. And when you look at the grand scheme of everything, Brian, I mean, God, there's so many storylines with every team, and there's so many storylines to think about and talk about. With OU specifically, I mean, obviously OU and Texas joining the conference is going to be one of the biggest talking points. But a couple of things. One, I mean, I think my biggest question, actually, sorry, I meant to ask you this. Sorry, I meant to ask you this. I only know that this is a little unfair, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but do you know who OU brought to the last three Media Days events? Can you name the player representatives? This is unfair, and I'm putting you on the spot. I only
Woody
know.
Washington.
Yep.
Um, Danny Stutzman was there last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Jonu Alu was one
Mm-hmm.
last year.
Mm-hmm. Two offensive players, obvious names.
Oh, Dylan Gabriel
Yep.
and Jalil Farouk.
Drake Stoops.
Drake Stoops. That's who. Oh,
Then
duh.
2022 was Ethan Downs,
Oh,
Marvin
duh.
Mims,
Yes.
Woody Washington, and Gabriel. And then in 21, it was Jeremiah Hall and Nick Manito. Think about
Wow.
how long ago that
Yeah,
feels. Right?
that's crazy.
When you think about compelling storylines and all this stuff, I mean, one thing that we're not getting that we would always get for Big 12 Media Days is the preseason rankings. We're not getting those until Friday. And
Oh,
yeah, and while those are generally pointless, they create a lot of discussion. And I actually think this would have been interesting to see where do people actually have OU in the pecking order of the SEC going into the
mm-hmm.
year. Brian, my biggest question is kind of twofold. It's one, what are reasonable expectations for OU going into the SEC? And two, what would be considered a successful season in the SEC? And while none of the players and Brent Venables are not going to put a record on it, they're not going to put a number on it. I mean, there's going to be questions about being able to compete in the SEC right away. And they know there's pressure to compete right away. So I'm going to ask you also because you wrote something a couple of days ago at OUinsider.com about going game by game through OU schedule because OU famously their win-loss over-under is at 7.5 according to Vegas. You wrote a piece going through every game of the schedule. I'm curious, what should expectations be? Where do you think they'll finish in the preseason rankings if you had to put a number on it? And what would be considered a successful season? And what did you and all of that tied up into what went into the piece that you wrote a couple of days ago?
Okay. So for the preseason rankings, let's start there. Is this top 25 or within the SEC?
SEC.
My expectation is somewhere between 6 and 8.
I was gonna say 6.
Yeah. Um, you know, to be honest with you, I think what kind of worries me about the preseason media ranking would be that teams like Missouri, Texas A&M, LSU, um, Tennessee, teams like that. I think with the entire media contingent for the SEC, I think those teams might get a nod over Oklahoma, and so it wouldn't surprise me at all to see all of them ranked ahead of Oklahoma. Now we know Georgia, we know Texas, we know Ole Miss, and probably Alabama. Those four are almost a lock to be ahead of OU in the preseason poll. So I would say somewhere between 6 and 8. I wouldn't be surprised. That being said, I think something that Oklahoma fans need to remember, and the last few pieces that I've written on Oklahoma, feature wise, I've really tried to hammer this home um, is while there's a lot of doubt about Oklahoma because of the recency bias, with everything going on the last couple of years. No playoff appearances the last 2 years or last 3 years. It's been a little bit for Oklahoma to get to this point, but everybody around the program feels like it's headed in an upward trajectory. The sentiment in the SEC is that Oklahoma is coming in and has no business competing in the mighty SEC. Now, I think what a lot of people fail to realize is before Nick Saban took over at Alabama, the SEC was not what it is today. The Big 12 was the juggernaut of the conferences at that point. Back in the heyday of Texas under Mac Brown, and Nebraska was coming off of its crazy levels of success. You had Colorado even was good. Texas A&M, I mean, it was just like it was really tough year in year out. In the Missouri, it was really tough. And so I think culture wise, Oklahoma is coming into this and fits really well. And so expectations wise, I don't one. What will the expectations be? They're not going to change. They won't change. I don't expect Oklahoma fans, the program, anything that it stands for. I don't think any of that's going to change. I think uh, expectations are going to be to win 10 games, which Oklahoma's done more than anybody in the country, and compete for a national championship. That's going to be the expectations. Now, what is reasonable for year one? Uh, you were dealt a tough hand if you're Oklahoma. Um, it's a tough schedule. And
Discrepancy in OU Texas schedules.
uh,
It's crazy.
so something that I heard on that is based on the last 10 years of like your winning percentage in the last 10 years is kind of something that went into that, into how they scheduled teams. And so that would make sense with Oklahoma, but um, I don't know. It's a tough schedule. I will say this. I don't look at that schedule and say about any of those teams, Oklahoma can't beat them. I don't say that about any of them. So um, now, am I telling you, oh, he's going to go 12-0? No, I am not telling you that by any means. That's not that I don't think that's in the cards for the Sooners this year. It's just a. I mean, the difference with the SEC is you've got scheduled between the Texas and Ole Miss games. You have a South Carolina team coming to Norman that if you overlook them, they're good enough to beat you. Like that, that's a team that is going to be good enough to beat you if you're not fully prepared. So I think that plays into OU's favor though, as crazy as that sounds. Um, this team historically, there's not letdown games on this. There's not letdown games really on this schedule. You've got to get up every single week and play. And I think that that's going to play into Oklahoma's favor a little bit. Just with the makeup of this team, I think that's a good thing. The challenge is going to be there, especially with Brent Venables as the head coach. So, expectations wise, what would be reasonable? I would say 8-4, 9-3 is probably like where my expectations would lie. Like 9-3 would be deemed a very successful season. That's probably good enough to have you in contention for a college football playoff appearance with as tough as the schedule is. Anything better than 9-3, if you go 10-2 on this schedule, I mean, you're talking about being, if you're not in the SEC championship game, you are probably somewhere in that 5-6 range, right outside of those first four buys. So uh, I think this is a tough slate. The back end of the schedule is rough, but I think it sets up well for Oklahoma to really be playing its best ball whenever the hardest games come up.
I'm stamping my claim because I agree with you. I'm stamping my claim on 9-3. That's going to be my official preseason
Yeah.
prediction. Um, But I agree with you. I don't think there's a game on OU schedule that they can't. There's not a game that they can't win.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that there, I mean, there's just a couple of question marks to me, and every season is different, and yada yada yada. But it's like you have to factor in a game or two that you don't see coming as a loss. I mean, think
Yes.
about Kansas last year.
Correct.
That's a game. That's a game of. It's a game they shouldn't have lost.
Yep.
Even Oklahoma State. It's a game that shouldn't have lost. Now some of the personnel is different. You've got brand new offensive and defensive coordinators. It's a whole new ball game. But like, don't look at South Carolina's record last year and assume that's a win.
Yep.
Don't look at Auburn's record last year and assume that's a win. It's at Auburn. But you think? I mean, think about OU going to Cincinnati last year and how that was a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a tough one. I mean, there's going to win at Auburn is it's not going to be easy. I'm really curious about what, and it's probably going to be just coach speak and player speak, but I am curious about how they are handling the pressure to come in and compete in the SEC right away.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what they have to say about that. And especially Brent Venables, right? I mean, I think that's going to be actually interesting.
Yeah, I think the big thing with Brent Venables is like he's obviously going to say the expectations never change here. It's because it's the standard, right? Like that's the hot button word is the standard, living up to it, and preparing that way. I think the reason why, and this kind of ties back into my story the other day, the 7-5 total is probably the best representation of that would be the fact that Vegas probably sees the vast majority of Oklahoma's games in the SEC this year being one-score games one way or another. Like that's just the style of football that you're going to see Oklahoma have to play. That bodes well, considering that they probably have, outside of Alabama, probably the best defensive unit on that schedule probably belongs to Oklahoma. I mean, and I think they potentially could be better than Alabama on the defensive side of the ball. So that bodes well. But when you're playing in that many one-score games, that's why you see these 8-4 SEC teams go into a bowl game and play somebody of similar schedule caliber and just blow them out of the water. It's because they're every week it's a meat grinder. Now, I will say, outside of Bama and Georgia, with and even really outside of Georgia with Nick Saban gone now, it really has been an extremely top heavy league when it comes to national title contenders. But that middle tier is higher than probably any other conference in the country. So, yeah, the expectations aren't going to change. I wouldn't expect. I would say the standard is going to be something you hear a ton. And as SEC people get more familiar with what Oklahoma actually is, and the tradition that they bring in to the SEC, I think those expectations will. I think they will get back to being what Oklahoma fans expect them to be, and as far as the national narrative goes, after the whole wave of things kind of subsides. Because I mean, if we're looking at this in a bubble 5 years from now, do we expect Oklahoma or Texas to be more competitive over the next 5 years? If you look at history, it's probably Oklahoma, but there's no way of knowing that, right? Like you can't. We only have what we have to go off of, and historically, Oklahoma over the last 15 years has won 11 of 15 against Texas and has been the better team. But you wouldn't know that by asking anybody in the SEC right now. So, yeah, expectations are high still. I don't think that's going to change at a place like Oklahoma, though. So, but I definitely don't agree with the sentiment that OU is about to become the next Nebraska or, all of that hoopla that we continue to hear.
Nebraska doesn't get top 5 recruiting classes and recruit like Venables in this coaching
As
staff.
soon as
It's
as soon
not
as
gonna
Nebraska lost its ties to the state of Texas, they were doomed. And you're not going to out recruit. You're not going to out recruit Ohio State in Big Ten country or Michigan or it just. Anyways,
Brian, I have a couple other things to throw at you, but real quick before I do that, I want to tell you about something. I want to tell you about Chubbies, Brian. That's what I want to tell you about. I want to tell you about Chubbies, and the reason why I want to tell you about Chubbies is that they are a lifestyle apparel brand that has no equivalent in all of human history. It's because Chubbies has crafted the most comfortable clothing with the most unique designs ever, and it's near impossible to wear them without being filled with the sense that life is truly beautiful, man. Awe-inspiring. It's a mystery with no fixed destination. So now why not look good? Why not feel good along the journey of life, Brian? But seriously, Chubbies offers a huge variety of high quality men's apparel, from super stretchy shorts and swim trunks and 3 inseam links to pants, polos, button down shirts for when you need to hit up your fave weekend brunch spot. When others see you sporting Chubbies in the wild, they're bound to say, "Oh wow, that person, they're wearing Chubbies. I now immediately respect them and think they're cool." For a limited time, Chubbies is giving our listeners 20% off your order with our exclusive code. That code is OU Insider, all lowercase, at chubbyshorts.com. That's OU Insider at CHUBBIESSHORTS.com. Make sure to head over there, use our code, get yourself some Chubbies today. Brian, I think the other thing that's interesting to think about, because look, we could dive into, Jackson Arnold, is he going to be ready as a true sophomore with one start under his belt? And we've kind of already touched on that. Yeah, and there's another storyline. There's other things about how's OU's defense going to fare. We're going to ask Stutzman and Bowman about that with so many returning guys coming back. One thing that I do think is interesting, especially to ask Brent Venables about, is about some of OU's NIL stuff. Some of the salary cap stuff, especially recently, not only just because of the transition to the SEC and NIL is just a different animal, but you think about officially naming Curtis Lofton as the team's general manager. You think about OU, they announced, I think yesterday, a new structure for their recruiting operations.
yep.
They're partnering with a former Philadelphia Eagles VP of football administration, Jake Rosenberg, to really dive deeply into all things NIL, all things recruiting. I think Lofton is going to be a huge part of that. And I think it's about kind of looking at the long-term future of NIL, the long-term future of potential salary cap, possibilities, things like that. I think really more than anything, I think gearing up for a reality where college sports looks more like the NFL, where college football looks more like the NFL. I wonder what Brent Venables will have to say about all that, because, he talked about Curtis Lofton a little bit in the spring, but now that Curtis is officially the general manager, and now that OU's announced this partnership with Rosenberg, I don't know. You find any of that compelling? Do you think that's going to be something talked about at SC Media Days?
I think it will be. If for nothing else, because Oklahoma it's doing its best to be on the cutting edge of this transition. It's something that with the House versus NCAA ruling, with the settlement, it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of not just college football, but college athletics as a whole takes this. And so for Oklahoma to go out of its way and go and get not just a former VP of football operations, but a guy that Howie Roseman really respects, and that's one of the go-getters whenever it comes to GMs in the NFL. And as much as you probably hate to hear it, that guy, if there are trades going on in the off season, if there's acquisition going on in the off season, chances are the Eagles are probably tied into it in some way, shape, or form. So you love to have somebody that's been a part of that process at Oklahoma now, and I think that's exciting. That being said, I think this is a slow burn. Like I don't know that it's going to immediately like affect the 2025 class. Um, the wheels of justice turn very slow, and so it's going to be something that we see just slowly be integrated into college sports over the next season or two, and maybe even further along than that. But I do think Oklahoma being proactive and being one of the teams, one of the programs being progressive about this is good. And I think it'll certainly be a talking point.
As a Cowboys fan, screw the Eagles. That's all I have to say about that. Brian, I told you I was going to ask you another fun question. So I'm going to give you another fun question on the spot, putting you in the hot seat. Rank these four opposing SEC coaches in terms of who you think is going to be most interesting or most compelling to listen to at SEC Media Days. Josh Heupel, Shane Beamer, Eli Drinkwitz, Jeff Lebby. From most interesting to least interesting.
From an OU perspective, there's a lot of hatred in Oklahoma for Drinkwitz right now. So I'll put Heupel 1 still, just because I think that being, like it or not, if you're a Tennessee fan and you're somehow listening to this, um, all of the frustrations, all of the disrespect, all of the feelings that Oklahoma has towards the SEC being newcomers and being like the new kid on the block, all of that's going to it's going to come to a head when Tennessee comes to town at the end of September. Like I expect that to be as wild an atmosphere as we've seen in Norman in quite some time. You throw on top of that the last quarterback to win a national championship for the Sooners on the other sidelines as a head coach. I think that's going to be number one for me. So I would say Heupel 1. Drinkwitz is probably 2. For better or for worse. I think that I'll put it this way: if anything comes out of Drinkwitz's mouth that has something to do with Oklahoma, it will be immediately become a headline. It just will. Like that's what you have. That's been just kind of a product of what we've seen happen on social media over the last several months, and it is what it is. I mean, that's an old Big 12 rivalry that's going to be rehashed, and it's going to be I do what
that game is going to be so toxic.
it's going to be hostile like that. It is going to be. I told Parker the other day on the live, I will have nothing OU related whenever I am in Columbia. Like nothing on me that even says that I'm from the state of Oklahoma. So I just want to blend in, do my job, and leave. Same thing for LSU later on in the season. But Drinkwitz 2, I would say basically only because of recency that Jeff Lebby would be 3, just because there might be some storylines come out of, maybe what he took away from the way that Brent Venables did his thing. Shane Beamer. Now I will say this: out of the 4, I think my favorite person out of the 4 to listen to, if I was just going to have a conversation, would absolutely be Shane Beamer. I love Shane Beamer, but as far as storylines go, compelling, I would say that's probably how I would rank them. I'd rank them Heupel, Drinkwitz, Lebby, Beamer.
I just wish, because man, and I've said this before, Jeff Lebby, that whole move to Mississippi State is so interesting.
That's odd.
And the way it happened, it was a pretty unceremonious leave.
Yep.
For Jeff Lebby. And to you're going to Mississippi State as a first-time head coach. And there's no denying that OU's offenses the last 2 years were some of the best in the country. There were also some genuine head-scratching moments, and you're going to go take over a program that just went 5-7 that now has OU in Texas. And it's a pretty risky gambit. I'm not saying it won't work, but I actually think it's something OU fans should be very curious about how how it goes. I just wish Jeff Levy was better in front of a camera.
Yeah.
He's just not.
Yeah.
I've been in many scrums with him. I've been in many press conferences with him. And look, I'm not even. That's not even really a criticism because I get it.
He's a football
Media
coach. Yeah.
are a different thing, and everybody looks at them differently. He's just not that interesting of a person on camera in media interviews. So that probably diminishes because if he had like a fiery person, imagine this was Lane Kiffin. Imagine
Yeah.
he was Lane Kiffin going from OU to go coach
Oh yeah.
Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Think about how that would be easy number one to
Yep.
me.
Yep.
But I agree with you, except I think I'm going to put Drinkwitz at one from an OU perspective.
Yeah.
I think I would go Drinkwitz, Heupel, Levy, Beamer. Um, OU Missouri has potential to become after. I mean, there's so many great rivalries in the SEC, but I think OU Missouri has the opportunity to be one of the best
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
There's a genuine hatred.
Yep.
It's different from OU Texas. Like
Yeah.
it's different.
Yeah.
There's not even really respect there.
Yeah.
Like OU Texas.
It feels kind of like Bedlam a little bit. Um, it's a little different because that's in state. But yeah, this is a conversation. I was curious. I wanted your thoughts on this. If it wasn't Missouri, I think the one thing that could potentially keep that from becoming like a real fist fight kind of rivalry is if it continues to be as lopsided as it was when they were in the Big 12. I mean, I think it's like 67 to 24. So like it's pretty lopsided. Um, if it wasn't them, I think a cool rivalry for Oklahoma could end up being somebody like Tennessee. Um, just with Heupel kind of being like the starting point of that, both extremely proud fan bases. Another one, Texas A&M and Oklahoma fans do not get along very well. There's kind of like that hate triangle between them, Texas, and Oklahoma. So interesting. But yeah, Missouri makes the most sense. I would say Arkansas does geographically because it's like perfect, but because Fayetteville and Norman aren't that far away. But I don't think the expectations at Arkansas are high enough for that to be what OU Missouri could be.
Oh, and I just don't. I really don't think there's enough animosity built into OU and Arkansas. They've barely ever played.
Yeah.
Now, if you consistently, fan the Flames and had them play every year, but
Right.
OU Arkansas play every year, and
Yeah.
that's kind of the thing to me is like, yeah, OU and Tennessee are going to play this year and next year. OU and Missouri, but to me, I think the one thing that would fuel a real rivalry or consistent rivalry is consistently playing each other.
Yep.
And that's where and maybe I'm looking into it, but like OU Missouri, I think that's sealed. I think it can really only go up in terms of hatred.
Correct. Yes.
But I do wonder, what if OU and Missouri they play this year and next year? What if they don't play again until 2027?
Yeah, that would
2028?
suck.
2028.
Yeah.
It's possible.
It
Wouldn't that
is.
be weird?
Yeah, it would be. That does feel like one that needs to be protected. Like they need to protect a couple rivalries. I think like Texas is going to have theirs with A&M and both Oklahoma protected every year. So and there is, I mean, like it or not, I mean, when you've played a team 90 times, like Oklahoma and Missouri have, there's history there. There has been rivalry in the past between the two. I mean, it does make sense and it makes sense geographically. So like it would be a pretty easy one. I do like, and this is something that I wanted to ask you as well. With the current makeup of the Big 12, with the current makeup of the SEC, with Oklahoma and Texas kind of be joined at the hip coming into the SEC, does it not feel like culturally that this fits Oklahoma better? Like this, the fit is as far as tradition, fan bases, just like the importance placed on football. It does feel like this conference has more teams at that level of fandom, I guess, for or expectations for football. So it just you look around. LSU's won national championships. Georgia, Alabama, obviously, Tennessee. Just a couple years before Oklahoma won its last national championship. Florida. I mean, you just kind of go down the list. There's teams there that Auburn. I mean, there's teams there that have pushed for that. And so to me, it just feels like this fit, while it may take a little bit, I think is going to end up being more uh, of like a place of belonging for Oklahoma than the end of what their tenure in the Big 12 looked like.
Yeah, I would say that this probably feels a little bit more natural already than I thought it was going to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I do think because of all of that, that is another reason why I think there's pressure on OU to compete right away.
Yep.
Like, how deflating would it be to go 7-5 in your first season
Tough.
in the SEC?
Yeah.
You know, so I think there is. I'm not saying that's going to happen, and I don't expect that to happen. That would shock me. Anything less than 8 wins would absolutely shock me.
Agreed.
But that's when you get into that intricate balance between what are reasonable expectations, because you can it's like you laid out in your story. I mean, you said the ceiling is 11-1, and I absolutely agree with you. If everything for OU hits, they can go 11-1. If everything falls apart, they can go 7-5.
Yep.
So that's where you where do you have that? What is the most realistic expectations that you can really have? But so all that being said, I do think this is going to feel more natural. That has been something in the back of my head. Like, how is it actually going to feel when OU's in the SEC? I think it's going to feel pretty damn normal for the most part. But I think it's slightly contingent on OU being competitive right away.
Yeah.
Is what I would. The last thing I'll ask you is, what team outside of OU are you most curious to hear from at SEC Media Days? Because there's a lot of answers you could go here, but my short answer is Ole Miss. Because Lane Kiffin's a character. Also, his dad, Monty Kiffin, just passed away. Obviously, rest in peace. But Lane Kiffin's a character. They went 11-2. They have the third best odds in the SEC, or to win the SEC.
Yeah,
they have the third best odds. They are real championship expectations. OU plays Ole Miss at Ole Miss, and I don't even think they're really a dark horse. I think they're a legitimate contender to win the SEC. So, for maybe not a hot take, but for a slightly different pick, I'm going to say Ole Miss. What say you?
No, I don't think that's a hot take at all. I would say that's probably like right in line with where I would fall. Ole Miss is going to be incredibly compelling, if for nothing else, that Lane Kiffin is the head coach there. But yeah, they are expected to be really good. I don't have the national championship odds in front of me, but I would imagine they're somewhere in the top 5 or 6. They have incredible. They had an incredible portal off season, and they brought back a lot of big time players.
Their 2 losses last year were to Bama and Georgia, and they only play Bama, I think.
Yeah. Yes. And no, I looked at.
They only lost. I just looked this up yesterday.
Okay.
Their 2 losses last year were to Bama and Georgia, and they only play one of them.
Okay, so they only played Georgia. That's right. They played Georgia.
They only played Georgia. Sorry, they only played Georgia.
Yes, and they are. Georgia beat them 52-17 last year. So that one, oof, there's going to be a lot of statements to be made about that game.
Look at the rest of their schedule, though.
Yeah, they can handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can handle it.
I mean, they could go 11-1.
Correct.
They really could.
Yeah.
10-2, 11-1.
Yep.
Very
but good. They could also go 9-3. I mean, going to the Swamp is tough. I don't know. I do think that is a team that has high expectations, and they should be high. If I wasn't going to go Ole Miss, I think Alabama would be my pick.
Yeah.
Things are just going to be different. Like, Nick Saban, and I'm not taking anything away from Kalen DeBoer at all. He is a fantastic football coach. I think he is legitimately a top 10 football coach, top 8 football coach in the country, period. Like, he's proven that. He was very successful with what he was able to put together at Washington. However, I just replacing somebody like Nick Saban is, I mean, it's impossible. Like, you think replacing, again, no offense whatsoever, replacing Bob Stoops was difficult. Finding a way, and Oklahoma is still technically is still transitioning out of that because their plan A didn't work out. It was different. Um, Replacing somebody that won what 7 national championships at a place in the last 20 years, like that's unheard of. It's going to be, and look, they still roster wise, Alabama's fine. They have plenty of talent there. Um, it's just culturally, it's going to be different there, and I expect the board to say the right things. I expect the players to say the right things. Like, that's just part of the allure of media days at the SEC. Like you said, it's pretty buttoned up. I expect some of that, but uh, when they step out on the field and they're playing that SEC schedule, um, Nick Saban was one of the best defensive minds. His mind transcended football because as offenses grew, which really in his throughout his time at Alabama, we saw offenses go from like wide open air raid to option style to spread, and then it became like this spread option hybrid, and then now we've got like every play is run pass option of some sort for a lot of teams, and he was able to like keep his defenses, regardless of that change, was able to keep his defenses near the top of the game, and that's just incredible. And I don't know, I don't know what to expect on that side of the ball. I do think that the pieces there are certainly in place, but I just think things at Alabama are going to be different. I just do. Right now, if I was to pick, I think that if there was a dividing line in national championship contenders on a yearly basis, I think it's Georgia and then everybody else right now. I don't think Alabama fits in that same category that they used to. I think everyone from Bama to Oklahoma to Texas to LSU, I think those teams are all probably more closely grouped together now than any of them are with Georgia. So,
They all
yeah,
have something to prove. Bama's not used to having something to prove. They've got
correct.
something to prove.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, that would be my pick. I would say Alabama, if not Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss.
Should be a fun, chaotic, stressful couple days at the
Yeah.
Omni Hotel in Dallas, Texas. But we will have you all covered here on this YouTube channel. We'll have you covered over at ouinsider.com. Make sure, if you're not a VIP member already, make sure you head over there. Become a VIP member. Look, we're just a couple of days or a couple of weeks away from fall camp. We're just a couple of days away from SEC Media Days. Look, there's so much stuff out there right now about Nyjah Kennedy at Stanford. So much swirling around. If you want the latest, if you want to know what's going on, make sure to head over to ouinsider.com. Not a better time to get signed up, set up, ready to go. We'll have multiple days covered for you at the Omni Hotel for SEC Media Days, and then we'll be back here on this podcast to recap it all next week. Until then, we'll see you guys next time on the Oklahoma Drill.